Hi there, I'm Paula Clammer, and today I'm going to make a couple of controversial statements. I'm going to give you 5 secrets that you've never heard before for learning legal English. And the reason they're controversial will become very obvious to you the minute I tell you what that number 1 is. But before I do that, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a lawyer, a translator, and a legal English coach. And I've been in the language and legal profession for a little over 20 years now. I've worked at some of the largest institutions throughout the world as a legal linguistic consultant, as a translator. I have also worked at a tier 1 law firm where I was in charge of the legal English program. I was part of the legal English program at one of the leading law schools in the United States. I kind of have gotten a feel for what is truly effective and what is not effective. And so my first, and this is the one that's really controversial, is one of the secrets to really learning legal English is don't study legal English. Like, do not sit down with something called a legal English workbook where you fill in the blanks of, fill in a missing word or complete a sentence or multiple choice on, in some sort of legal English context. That's not helpful. It's really not conducive to mastering any of the skills that you need in the real world to be a very effective communicator in law. Law is itself a practice, right? There's nothing theoretical about what we do. We may learn a lot of theoretical concepts to be able to do what we do, but the law is theory applied to practice. We are constantly required to think on our feet. We're constantly required to be able to solve problems. And what is very important about legal practice in particular is that we are required to be able to communicate very effectively. And too much of that theoretical knowledge or too much of that focusing on, doing workbooks and standardized learning is that standardized learning has nothing to do with law practice. And because law practice isn't standardized, especially not at the global level, especially not at the level where you are. If you're one of my followers, you work at the global level. You work professionally across cultures, across languages, across legal traditions. And so there's no level of standardized anything that is going to be helpful to you. There's a better way to go about learning legal English. One of those things that you can do is that you can immerse yourself in your subject matter, but do it in English. If you immerse yourself in your subject matter, whatever area of law you practice and that you really want to master the communication style and the vocabulary and the skills that you need to be able to communicate that, then a mindful approach to that immersion is actually going to help you. And what I mean by a mindful approach is this: if you're reading, pay attention to how things are being communicated. Pay attention to the words that pop up the most in that area of specialization that you're trying to learn about. Pay attention to how information is communicated, to how sentences are structured, to how really good writers go about that writing process. But then also try to produce, because a lot is learned in the production process as well. So journal it. If you did some reading, say you did 10 minutes of reading about a subject matter that you're trying to learn a lot about, then sit down and write in a journal. Write about what you learned, write your own observations, because what you're doing then there is you're giving that recent information that you just were exposed to, you're giving it some kind of practical application. Number 2, read 10 minutes a day for 30 days straight. 30 is not a random number. It has been shown that 30 consecutive days is about the time it takes your brain to start processing something as a habit. And what we really want to do here is we want to acquire the habit of reading mindfully, of reading to learn. What I am asking you to do here is to actually be really strict those first 30 days. Really do it every day so that it does become a natural part of your day. Number 3, if you don't have a study buddy, then what I want to recommend that you do, and this one's going to seem really silly, but I'm going to ask you to do it anyway because it works. I promise you that it's going to feel weird at first, but it works. I've actually tried this myself. I'm learning German at the moment, and I have tested this on myself. So I know how silly it feels, but I also know how effective it is. So what this does, this silly exercise does of just looking at yourself in front of a mirror and just talking to yourself, is it forces you out of that silent place that you might be in. And it will help you to just get in the habit of speaking. In the beginning, you're going to feel silly, you're going to laugh at yourself, you're going to say really basic stuff. But then as you get into it, you find that you're going to go into a rhythm where you start talking more and more at the level and about the things that you need to talk about professionally as well, and it becomes naturalized, right? You get into the habit of doing it, and so then when you have to do it in real life, it comes easier. You feel more confident. The words just sort of come out with more ease. And so I want you to think about your language learning process as not being just about writing, not being just about reading, but also being about being able to speak as well. You work on all of these skills together at the same time because language is about all of these things. Next, I am going to recommend that you do find a study buddy. If you cannot afford to get formal legal English training, or if you simply don't have the time, whatever the reason is, find someone to study with. And if you can find someone to study with who has a different mother tongue than you do, that is an ideal person to study with. Now, the reason I say that is because when English is your second or foreign language, you very often have what are called language one interferences. I have a whole video on language one interferences and what they are. So if you haven't seen it, then just look for that video where you'll learn about that. But the short version is that language one interferences are when your mother tongue creeps in and takes over. And so you end up saying things that are literal translations of how you would have said them in your mother tongue, and they're not always easy to understand for the person who is either listening to you or reading your writing. Sometimes they come up in writing as well. When you have a study buddy, your study buddy will very often point those out. They'll ask you questions. They'll ask for clarification. Or if they're reading you, they'll say, well, I can't quite understand this. If your study buddy has your same mother tongue, they might have some of the same language one interferences as you, especially if you're both at a similar proficiency level at the time that you team up. And so it may be hard for that person to identify your language one interferences because they have the same one. So they would have said it the same way that you said it, or they would have written it the same way that you have just written it. If your study buddy has a different mother tongue than you, their language one interferences are going to be different from your language one interferences. And so what happens there is that you can help each other identify your language one interferences. If you're speaking, you can ask for clarification. If you're reading each other's writing and giving each other feedback, that's where you would say, well, I don't quite understand what you mean here. And you'll look at it, you'll realize it's not necessarily a grammar problem, it's a mother tongue interference problem, and then you can start to really work on that and fix that. Number 5, I do recommend that you get a legal English coach. If it's not me, then get someone. But it is very helpful to have someone to guide us through our learning process. Before I let you go, I'm just going to give you a little recap of the 5 tips that I just gave you. It's don't study, immerse yourself in your subject matter instead. Carve out 10 minutes a day to read in English for 30 consecutive days. If you don't have a study buddy, then practice in front of the mirror. If you can get a study buddy, then do so, and try to get a study buddy whose mother tongue is different from yours, and get yourself a legal English coach, whether it's me or it's somebody else. Just try to get that extra level of support so that you can take your English to the next level. Thank you so much for listening today, for watching this video. If you found this helpful, then I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to this channel, give me a little thumbs up, and of course, leave your comments. I would love to hear from you.